Hey everybody, welcome to Drive Thru Review 196. Today I'm going to talk about Napoleon, the Waterloo Campaign 1815. This is a reprint. This is the 4th edition, just released by Columbia Games. They just had a Kickstarter campaign. The game originally came out in the 70s, I believe, and then has seen now 4 editions. It's a block war game from Columbia Games. It plays, it says, in about an hour to 2, and that is about right. This does play a fair bit quicker than something like Hammer of the Scots or Julius Caesar. And I will say that this is a little bit more accessible than Julius Caesar, which to my mind was, a pretty good introduction to war games and block war games. This is probably even, I don't know necessarily call it lighter, but there's less, rules, exceptions, and things like that for it. The components in here are outstanding. Easily the best that I've seen for a block war game. I've not seen every block war game ever, but out of the few that I've seen that I've played, this easily is the best that I've seen, especially from Columbia Games. So enough of that. Let me go into and show you how it works, and then I'll come back and tell you what I think of it. So let's take a look at the components here. Now here's the board, and probably at this height, it's a little bit busy and confusing. It's not too bad, once you're sitting in front of you and you're playing the game. And the board is a little bit small, so let me zoom in a little bit here to talk a little bit more about the board. So a couple of key features here. You can see you've got towns here, sort of little buildings, and then a word, a name of the town. You've got big roads here. These are your major roads. And then you've got these skinny little roads here. These are your minor roads. You've got rivers and then bridges going across the rivers. And then you've got the French border here, and then sort of this dividing line here. Now there's 3 sort of factions here. It's normally a 2-player game. You'll have French blocks here in blue. You'll have the Prussian blocks here in black. And then you have the Anglo-Dutch blocks here in red. Now basically the Prussians and the Anglo-Dutch, these are considered sort of the allies. These are going to be fighting against the French. Now you can play this with 3 players, and each side will take one, sort of faction of blocks there. Or if you're normally playing a 2-player game, one person takes French, and the other player takes the black and the red blocks. Now, the French are always going to line up and set up behind this line here to the south. They'll put blocks in the towns there. And then the black ones here, the Prussians, are always going to deploy east of this dotted line. And then the Anglo-Dutch are going to deploy to the left here to the west of the dotted line. So this map, unlike most Columbia block games, is actually a thicker cardboard stock here. So you can see I've got no cover, no glass, or any acrylic or anything like that on top of here. It lays flat, it sits good. But once you start cramming blocks, I'm just going to use different color here, into this town, and it is very, very feasible to have several blocks in maybe one town here, like so. You're going to take up a lot of room there, and you start to sort of bleed over into other towns. So you can see here we've got 2 little towns here, Soiree and Douin. If I mispronounce those, excuse me. But I get all these over here, and it's like, okay, well, which town are they in? It's not too difficult. I mean, you can obviously just, center them. But I definitely have had to stack blocks on top of each other. And I just wish the map was a little bit bigger. Now, one real nice little additional component here is the setup. So we've got the French setup here, and basically these are all the blocks that you're going to have, and it gives you a historical setup. And you don't have to set it up this way, but if you want to sort of match the historical, setup, this works like so. And then you've got the other setup here for the Anglo and the Prussian setup there. So it's really easy to set this up, and it's one of the things that's sort of a pain, with the other block games I've played, is figuring out where everybody goes, and you got to look through the rule book. But this is easy. You just grab, the block, and then you find sort of its identifying characteristics, like whatever division it is, and, and the stats and the type of unit it is. You find that on there, and then you can look and see, okay, this is about where I should set that thing up. In addition to the board and the blocks, you're also going to have, some dice as well, obviously. And then you're going to have these battle boards. And there's 2 of these in the game, and these are nice components here. And one of the really cool and interesting thing about this game is you're going to be moving troops around, and then whenever you move into another spot where you're going to have a battle, then you're going to sort of pause the game, if you will, and then go into a battle mode. Each side's going to take blocks. The defender is going to deploy blocks first, and then you're going to want to have blocks in at least the left, center, and right region. You have to have blocks here. Now, if for some reason you had, less than 3 total blocks, where you couldn't be able to fill up these left, center, and right spaces, then you would do away with the battle board and just have sort of a traditional skirmish. So if you're familiar with, Julius Caesar or something like that, then you just sort of, everybody will reveal the blocks, and you'll have a typical battle. I'll talk about battles more in a second. But the object of the battles here is once you move in, you have your battle, and what you're trying to do is get one of your pieces into one of the flanks here of the opposing piece, and that'll cause a rout, basically a victory, and force the other opponent to retreat any of their blocks that they have, and likely lose some of the blocks, and sort of an immediate elimination if they can't get enough blocks across these roads. Now these roads here are really basically the game. So you can basically on your turn is you can move blocks across some of these major roads and the minor roads, but you're restricted by the number of blocks that you can move. So in a normal move, you're going to activate a group of blocks here and then move them. You can move 8 across a major road and then 6 across a minor road. But if you have to retreat, you can only retreat 2 blocks across a major road and 1 block across a minor road. In the case if you were to lose and get routed, if you don't have enough roads and different towns to retreat from, let's say you lost the battle here and you can retreat out these roads here, you've only got these 3 roads. Let's say I was coming in this way, we have a battle, you lose, you've got 1, 2, 3 roads that you can retreat, and it's 2, 4, and then 5 blocks that you could retreat. So anything left over, you're going to lose, and that's going to add to your opponent's victory condition, which I'll talk more about in a second. So the game is played over here a series of days, and you've got sort of a French activation, Allied, French, Allied, French, Allied, and these black ones here are basically the nighttime of the day. So we can just take, they get some extra blocks here, you take one of them as a marker, and you can just, mark your turns that way. Each turn, you're going to get basically 2 activations. So first turn is French. They can activate 2 groups of blocks. So if we had some blocks here, let's say we had some guys here, and then this guy maybe got separated from his buddies, and he's all alone. So we can activate this group and then that group. So I'd activate 2 guys, and then let's say we didn't have any battles, we go to the Allied turn. They're going to actually activate 2 separate groups. So you can activate the Prussians, and then you can activate 1 group of the Anglos. So you activate 1 of each, and then if you have any battles, you resolve that, and we go to the next round. So the night phase is different because you cannot cause a battle. So let's just say we had a group of Anglos here, and we're going into the French night phase here. So we could not march these suckers in here during the night, which, it makes sense. This was back in 1800s. There was not really a whole lot of electricity and lighting to help you with your night fighting. So during the night phase, you cannot move in to cause a battle, and you also cannot do a force march. Now, normally in the day, you can move 2 units. So let's say we move these guys, and then maybe he moved over here, let's say. So then we can go ahead and maybe push our luck a little bit and try a force march with some of the different units here. So normally, if you have one of these types of units here, these are your infantry units with the rifles, and then you can see here you've got your foot cavalry here. Now these guys can move basically 1 adjacent spot for 1 town. And I just want to make a quick note, these are actually foil stickers, and I don't know, it's pretty cool. It's just got a nice little texture. It feels a little bit sturdier than a normal sticker. That's just sort of a nice touch there, but regardless. So you can move these guys all basically 1 spot normally. And then you also will have leaders, you'll have cavalry here, and then you'll have your horse artillery there. And so these guys can actually move up to 2 spaces. Now, in addition to those spaces, you can actually force march basically by rolling a die to see if they get a sort of an extra little activation movement at the end of the movement. And basically the way that works is you have a 50% chance of that unit losing a step. So let's say we had moved this guy here. He's a cavalry, so maybe he moved 2 spots. And then we want to try to get him to move a little bit further. We're going to roll the die here. So you got a 5, he's okay. So if you roll a 1, 2, or 3, he's actually going to have to lose a step. And again, losing steps is basically like rotating. So this guy's at full strength. You can see he's at 2. If we rotate him down here, he's going to be at step 1. If he gets hit again, or we try to force march him again, it'll have to rotate him, and then he'll be eliminated. So you can do that to sort of push your luck, maybe take a little bit of ground. If you have a leader with the group there, then you're going to add +1 to your die roll when you force march. And then the leader also, if you try to force march the leader, you also have to roll a die, but you add +1 to its force march roll as well. So they'll help with the movement there. There's also some restrictions if you're moving across a river. Normally it's fine, but if you're moving across a river to attack, it actually reduces the number of blocks that you can move across the road as well. So that's simply what you're going to do. Is you're going to do 2 activations that resolve any battles, and then you're going to play all the way to the end here. If you have not achieved a victory and you're France, then you're going to lose the game. But there are some victory conditions that can cause the game to end earlier, and that is very, very likely. So let's talk about how battles are going to work, because that's key to winning the game. Okay, so once we have a battle, we're going to take all the blocks that are in that location there, and we're going to deploy them, as I said earlier. But initially, you're going to deploy them hidden, like you have them on the board, and then we'll end up revealing out all of them. But the first thing you're going to do is a little bit interesting here, is you're going to draw these terrain blocks here. And these are different types of terrain, so that you can see there's a farm, here's some woods here, and you can see there's some different effects that they're going to have here. Here's a hill. So the attacker's going to draw one of these. They're going to figure out where they want to put them. Let's say they drew a farm. Let's say we'll put that in the center. And then the defender will draw two, and maybe they've got these here, so maybe they'll lay them out like so. And then we're going to deploy our units. So I've got everything set up here, and again, you want at least one unit in each of your areas there. Everything's face up for everybody to see. And what you're going to have here is sort of a zoomed in, sort of micro level, almost squad level sort of activity here. That's very interesting. So on your turn, the attacker's going to go first, and they're going to activate all their units. And you can do a couple of different things. You can move the unit, or then you can attack with the unit, and some units will let you do sort of two battle moves where you can move and attack. And again, you're trying to get your guy into here without anybody else, which will cause a rout, which will cause an immediate retreat, and hopefully some elimination of their units. So as far as the movement goes, you can basically move up and down. You can't ever move laterally like this. You can move out of the reserve into any of these areas, or back into the reserve. The reserve is safe grounds. Units can never be fired upon or attacked there. Now the cavalry here, you can tell this by the sword here, or the infantry, they need to be what's called engaged, basically in the same zone as the other unit to attack. So we can maybe move him up here, and then he can attack. The artillery here can actually attack, one space away here. So this guy could fire basically 3 dice. The number here is the number of dice that you're going to roll, and then the sort of firing power is this number here, so F1. So that means on a roll of a 1 of these 3 dice, then you will exact a hit on this zone here. When you take hits, you have to take the guy that has the largest step value. So this is the only one in here, so he's a 4, so we'll take him down a notch if we got a hit, and maybe another notch if we got 2 hits. If you have more than one guy that has a higher or equal step value, then you can choose, and the defender chooses in that case. Now the artillery cannot fire ranged combat if they have one of their own friendly units there, because obviously they don't want to hit them. Now cavalry can actually do sort of a move and attack, and they actually get a little bit of a bonus. So if I decide to activate him, I can move him up here, and then I roll my 2 die, but since it's my first attack, and it's my first sort of charge attack, so it's a move and an attack, I get to add 1 to this. So I roll 2 die. Instead of hitting on a 2, I hit on a 3. And that's only for cavalry there. Now again, the infantry, they can just move, but then they've got to sit there and wait until they've activated all their units, and then their opponent's going to activate their turn, and then they're probably going to get attacked there. But then they've got to wait till the next battle turn to be able to do an attack like that. And you've got different terrain here, so like you can see this one here is a farm, and it's a 1 infantry plus 1, and so that basically gives it a extra firepower there, so that would hit on a 2 instead of a 1. And so after you've activated all your units, then you can move units into the reserve from an adjacent location. So let's say we're having a battle here in Charleroi, and we had some adjacent units here in Binch. So depending on the road going into it, you can move in a certain number of units. So if we had some units here, we can move in 1 across this minor road, whereas we can move in 2 units from up here down from here into there, and that'll go immediately into the reserve. So let's say we had 2 more units come in. So after you activate all your units, then you can move some guys into the reserve, and then it's going to be the next player's turn. They're going to activate all their units. They're going to bring any reinforcements that they have into the reserve. And this is a key portion of the game, the way this reserve works and the way the retreating works across the roads. I'll talk a little bit more about that in detail when I go back to my talking head there. But just keep that in mind. So again, you're going to roll dice, you're going to take step losses. If again somebody gets down to 0, they're going to be eliminated. That's going to contribute to victory. And then again, you want to get a guy into the spot. That'll cause a rout. And then all their units have to retreat. So if there's not enough roads, that they can retreat all their units across, then they're immediately going to have to choose units to sacrifice and lose. So how does victory get determined here? Well, let's just read. The French win if they defeat both Allied armies before time expires. The Anglo-Dutch, the Red Army is defeated when 8 or more units are eliminated, and the Prussian army is defeated when 9 or more units are eliminated. So that is the victory condition here. You are just trying to basically thin out their forces. Okay? And then the French also win if they occupy any of these, 2 of these 3 towns here. I'll talk about what these 3 towns are important for. And the Allied will win if they eliminate 12 of the French units. So again, just by eliminating units, they're going to win. So what's so special about these 3 towns here? Okay, let's talk about that. So you can see here we've got Ghent, and then we've got Brussels over here, and then we've got Liège over here. So if we zoom back out here, we can see the French are going to start here along the bottom here, going over the French border there. And then you've got basically the 3 supply towns of Ghent, Brussels, and then Liège over there. So if the French ever occupy and basically have, a sole unit, or they're the only ones in there, then they're going to cut supply, to the Allied player. So if they occupy 2 of these, then they're going to immediately win the game. So we're also going to do a supply check at the end of every French turn. So if the French occupy any of those 3 towns, the Allied player has to choose to lose a certain amount of units. So let's say we've just done this round, we go there, and then the French occupy Ghent. If they occupy Ghent, the Allied player has to choose to lose 1 unit. If they occupy Brussels, they have to lose 1 unit. If they occupy Liège, which is the furthest away, then the Allied player has to lose 2 units. So that basically is going to contribute to the other victory condition of just eliminating units. So you're going to eliminate units by battle and also by trying to occupy, one of those sort of key supply lines. And that is basically the game. Okay, I hope you enjoyed the overview. I should mention that this particular edition came with this Eagles card game, which is sort of like a collectible type of game, I guess. But it's basically the same theme of the Waterloo battle, and just give you a little bit of the show of the cards there. There's different factions and different things like that. There are some rules to actually play with these cards when you go into a battle. Basically, you draw a certain amount of cards based on your faction that match the types, whether it's infantry or leaders or whatever, and you actually play a sort of little mini card game. And I haven't tried that, but the rules for the card game are pretty almost identical to how you're going to play, the battles as I showed you on the battle board. So it's there. It seemed to me like you kind of needed a full set of cards to really get away with that and do that effectively, to have it balanced. I'm not 100% sure, but it's kind of an interesting idea. It had me a little bit interested. It's sort of like a like 1989 or Hannibal, I think, in Carthage, where you have this sort of mini battles, which I really liked in 1989. So I may try that later, but the battles are very interesting. So let's just talk about that. So one cool thing that you can do, just to give you kind of an example of why these battles are so interesting, is you're going to move your guys in, you're going to have a little battle going, but then you really have to keep in mind what the roads connected to that battle are going to allow you to get in there as far as the reserves go. Because remember, at the end of every battle turn, you can bring in a certain amount of troops across the different roads. So the interesting part about that is you could kind of come in with a force of infantry, which are a little bit more defensive. They have some more hits that are absorbable. A lot of them are 3s and 4s, so you can get those kind of out front, and maybe some artillery to kind of soften up the other side. And that you can have cavalry sort of coming in from the flanks across those roads, get them into the reserve, soften them up, and then boom, on your next turn, you've got guys in the reserve, and then you can do sort of a double step, because remember, those cavalry guys can move twice, and then sort of zerg those in, from the neighboring towns. So there's a lot of interesting things like that to keep in mind as the way that the battle sort of space works on the map is very, very different definitely from Julius Caesar and Hammer of the Scots, at least. So that is a real key to not just necessarily building up a force and then, having a battle and then you retreat or you regroup after victory maybe. There's a lot more to consider, and the whole reinforcement stuff is a lot more developed and just, there's just a lot more to it, a lot more that you have to consider. Likewise, when we're talking about doing the retreats, is you want to be sure that you're in a good position so that if you do get creamed, you're going to be able to move most of your guys out to retrieve them to safe haven, so they also don't lose too much ground, for the next battle that they're probably just going to get slaughtered on. Because like I said, as you retreat those guys, that's going to directly contribute to losing or winning if you have to start eliminating guys because you don't have enough roads to retreat them. So the nature of the map is very, very important in the game. It's definitely about those sort of supply lines, not really supply lines, but, roads of travel and things like that. So definitely very accessible game. You set your guys up. You can just set them up historically. That's how I played it. It plays really quickly. I mean, I had a game that was like just over an hour, and it's bloody. I mean, you get in there, there's a ton of French troops kind of bunched up, and it's on the onus of the French player to attack. The Allied player can kind of wait and see and just, make sure that they don't leave the French player sort of a direct line to one of those supply towns, which isn't too difficult to protect. But the French have a mass of troops. It's kind of bunched together, or you can set them up that way. And now, I played with mostly the historical setup. It's just slight variations on that. I didn't really play around too much with some diverse setups that way. But you can have a gigantic battle. I mean, like, we're talking turn, I think, 4 or 5, maybe even earlier than that. With a huge battle of so many troops. Like I said, the map gets really crowded. I wish it was just maybe a third as big or something, because it just gets kind of crowded. But you're gonna have a huge, gigantic battle and lots of losing troops, and then you're gonna be sort of on your way to one guy maybe winning or losing. So you get in there quick, you just start fighting. It's gonna be lots of damage, lots of units lost, but you really have to set yourself up to be able to reinforce effectively, retreat effectively, all that good stuff. So really, it's just a fun, quick little game. And I've only played this twice now, and I played Julius Caesar, I think, 5 or 6 times. And that one is kind of, Julius Caesar is stayed in my collection just because of its accessibility and things. This one has a little bit less rules and things, because Julius Caesar had like its naval movement, and it has sort of like a wintering kind of thing with the threshold of troops that you could keep in there. So you don't really have to consider that in this. The only real sort of consideration where your troops are located is all strategic. Well, and Julius Caesar is strategic too, but it's just the road movement and the consideration for reinforcements and retreating. You can have 40. Well, there's not 40 blocks, but you can have like 50 blocks in one town if you really wanted to. There's no limit there. You can just pack them in there. So that's basically just the game. You can activate 2 guys, have a battle, just try to blow everybody up. And there's not really any key towns to occupy, or like Hammer of the Scots has a whole lot of rules. So I'm definitely glad they reprinted this, and I like the battles. I mean, I'm just going to keep talking here, but I like the tactical battles on the battle boards, where you have I talked about how you can supply them with the reinforcements, but if you just zero in on that battle board, that's very interesting. It's sort of, like I said, like a squad level sort of deal. You've got maybe a little bit of terrain you're going to add, and you've got to sort of figure out where to deploy your troops and how you're going to move them up, and try to capture one of those zones, and try not to get your zone captured, because then you've got to retreat. So anyway, so that's Napoleon. Definitely take a look at it, and again, the components are a definite upgrade over what they normally do. Just wish that map was bigger. Man, it's not the other word. I'm making too much of it. Let me back up. Making too much of it does not make the game unplayable. It's just tight. It's almost like fiddly. You want to be careful, like moving your blocks. But I have not seen the game be unplayable by any means. So anyway, sorry to leave you with that thought. But anyway, that's Napoleon. Thanks.